The United Kingdom once used to rule one-fourth of the world. Its colonies included India, South Africa, New Zealand, Jamaica, and even the US. But guess where they are now? From ruling the world to becoming a place where having your phone snatched while walking on the streets or having your car stolen from your own home have become very common. So common, in fact, that insurance companies in London have stopped giving insurances on Range Rovers because of high theft rates. If you look at the numbers as well, UK's GDP per capita today is less than the poorest state of the US, which is Mississippi. This is surprising because UK at one point in time used to rule over the US. The US as well was a British colony till 1776. In fact, even as of 2007, UK's GDP per capita was higher than that of the US. But since then, it's been on a relative decline. How did things get so bad? Let us figure it out in this video and our 8th economic case study. We will first spend some time looking at the rise of the UK, aka the colonial era, and then we would divide its fall into 3 phases. The third phase is going to be rather controversial, and it's going to be from my own experience of living in the UK for 2 to 2.5 years and visiting the place almost every other year over the last decade. So it would indeed be a very unique perspective. That said, let's get started, mate. It is hard to believe how just a few thousand Britishers were able to manage and administer over all of India, a country with hundreds of millions of people. If Indians are known for their jugaad, Americans for their marketing and product innovation, then the Britishers have to be commended for their administrative and their organizational skills. But how did they become so powerful? Well, there are 2 reasons for that. Firstly, because of being an isolated island nation, the UK never really needed a strong army to protect themselves. What they did need, however, was a strong navy, and they invested very heavily into it. Their navy also helped them head out on long-distance ocean voyages. It was this naval dominance that first made them a trading superpower and then helped them colonize a quarter of the world. The second reason is the Industrial Revolution. With technological advancements such as the steam engine, power loom for textile, improved iron making processes, and so on, UK became the workshop of the world. It was the first country to be industrialized. Colonies in North America, the Caribbean, and later Africa provided raw materials like sugar, tobacco, cotton, and yes, by the way, indigo from India as well, which helped fuel UK's manufacturing industries. They basically used to import raw materials and export final goods. British goods began to dominate the global markets. Things were going great. But then came 1914 and with it, the First World War. This was the beginning of UK's decline, the first phase of UK's decline. The First World War significantly weakened UK's economy. War debt soared and global competition, especially from the US and Germany in the manufacturing sector, also started to rise. The UK was no longer the sole manufacturing hub of the world. World War II, which started in 1939, was even more devastating. Not only did the war efforts drain them financially, but a lot of colonies of the UK also began demanding freedom. Independence of India in 1947 marked the beginning of rapid decolonization. It was followed by Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Malaysia, and spread across Africa and then the Caribbean. All this while, things were not the best for the UK at home as well. The UK largely has 2 popular parties, the Conservatives and the Labour Party. The Conservatives are rather a capitalistic bunch. The Labour, on the other hand, have had a history of being very socialist. Under the Labour Party, the UK adopted very socialist policies. They nationalised key industries like coal, steel, and railways. And while this aimed to create economic stability, I guess if you watched my video on the fall of Kolkata, you can guess the outcome. As expected, it was a disaster. British industries, plagued by these labour strikes and inefficiencies, struggled to compete with emerging economies like Japan and Germany. UK was the first country to be industrialized. It was also the first country to thus be deindustrialized. By the 1970s, the British pound lost the status of the world's reserve currency and it was replaced by the dollar. By 1976, things got so bad that the UK government needed a bailout from the IMF. However, then came a sigh of relief in 1979 with Margaret Thatcher becoming the Prime Minister of the UK. The reforms under her were UK's equivalent of India's liberalization in 1991 under PV Narasimha Rao and in 1979 the Chinese reforms under Deng Xiaoping. Things started getting better. In fact, much better. By 1990s and the early 2000s, London had once again become the global financial hub. They were also perfectly situated between the New York Stock Exchange and the Japanese Stock Exchange. When the Japanese Stock Exchange would close, the London Stock Exchange would open, and by the time the London Stock Exchange would close, the US stock markets would open. Because of all the financial deregulation that came under her, financial sector became the backbone of the UK economy, and the UK economy also started growing. However, then came 2008. Now we can call this bad luck or perhaps bad karma, but the impact of the 2008 crisis was so bad that the UK never recovered from it. UK's GDP per capita, which was at $50,000 in 2007, 18 years later, even today, is at $49,000, which is lesser than what it was 18 years ago. For reference, in the same period, the US's GDP per capita has gone from $48,000 to $84,000 per capita. This was phase 2 of UK's decline. Now coming to the controversial phase 3. And there are two things that I want to talk about over here. Firstly, I feel that a large part of UK's population now suffers from the lack of ambition. What this does translate to though is great work-life balance. Imagine reaching your office at 10 a.m. and then leaving by 4 p.m. after a great lunch break and finally heading out to the pub to have a great time with your friends. This is very common in the UK. And as a result of this, the UK today ranks 11th in terms of work-life balance. But I guess work-life balance doesn't go in well with prosperity and ambition. On top of that, I also feel that in an attempt to be politically correct, the UK is literally damaging itself. Liberals would hate me for saying this and probably even deem me racist, but I really encourage you to look into the grooming gangs. I can't really talk about it very openly because I risk getting flagged, but I really encourage you to read into it. Further, things have also become so bad that people can't talk about such topics very openly because they could get arrested.
With the rise of so-called non-crime hate incidents, arrests over grossly offensive memes, and the government's online safety bill threatening to clamp down on social media posts, can you really speak your mind in 21st century Britain?
Why? Again, all in an attempt to be politically correct. Their foreign and immigration policy as well has been a disaster, and that's very evident. And this is not just a problem with UK, but with most of Western European countries. I also believe this to be one of the reasons behind the lack of law and order in the UK. It's all like that cycle, by the way. Strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and bad times create strong men. So maybe a few generations down the line things would be much better, but we'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, this brings us to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and found this useful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below.